1974, and the McGill University football team first implemented the modified rules of English rugby in a game with Harvard. The potent offense of today's game was not yet evident, and the game ended 0-0. In 1891, the Canadian Rugby Union was formed, followed by the birth of the Big Four, comprising teams from Hamilton, Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal. Our modern-day game certainly has no monopoly on competitiveness.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Daily Fantasy CFL Podcast. I'm your host, John Sullivan. You may know me as Buffalo66, or you may know me from some other podcasts I'm involved in. And here we're going to talk about the upcoming week in CFL and talk about it from both a betting and a fantasy perspective. So let's get right to it. Our format usually goes with a review, then a preview. So let's get started here. Last week, I had a pretty average result. I went 1-1 in my wagers. If you've been following along, I actually had a 5-game losing streak in my wagers, and that ended. So I'm up to 14-10-1 on the year wagering on CFL, which is good. Had an 0-3 start on the year, so up and down. That's the way it goes. My DFS lineup was a little below average. I think it would have competed with anybody who didn't stack the 2 high-scoring games from last week. There wasn't really too many players that had a huge performance. The one that I know right off the top of my head, Darius Bowman, who did, I had him. So I think it would have been very competitive, although not dominant. So let's get into last week's review. Week 13 is in the books. And there were, as always, 4 games played. Let's talk about those. The first game was the Alouettes at the Tiger Cats. It was Alouettes 17, Tiger Cats 20. Hamilton really struggled offensively in this one, but they got the W. Zach Caleros was under 300 yards for the first time in a while. Didn't have much of, I think he had 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Jerron Carter actually played special teams defense in this game. I think there was an effort to show that he's a team player. This team is really emotionally in disarray. Players don't like each other. The coach is the general manager. It's a dysfunctional family, to say the least. Rakeem Keita was average. The rest of the season is his shot to see if he's going to be a starter in the CFL, and he's in a kind of a bad spot there. Terrell Sutton and BJ Cunningham were the best fantasy options on the night for the Alouettes. Montreal easily covered the plus 10.5, and this game went under. It was kind of a ho-hum game. Second game was Argonauts and Blue Bombers in Toronto 29, Winnipeg 46. Toronto actually led at the half, but Winnipeg put up 27 second-half points and pulled away. Lefevre had 4 touchdown passes, spread the ball around. Didn't have a lot of yardage, and I think he had 2 picks. Deontay Spencer had a touchdown catch, but he only had 1 punt return. His Winnipeg basically didn't need to punt the ball very much. McDuffie had a punt return touchdown for Winnipeg. And the running backs, Brandon Whitaker and then Flanders for Winnipeg, who was playing for Andrew Harris, both had 100-yard games, and both quarterbacks finished under 300 yards. Obviously an easy cover for Winnipeg here, and easy for the over. For a high-scoring game, there wasn't really like an outstanding performance. I would say the McDuffie return was, he was the big winner in the fantasy points there. But otherwise, everybody was pretty average. Third game was Red Blacks at Stampeders, and it was Red Blacks 23, Stampeders 48. Now, this game I watched all the way through. It was a lot closer than the final score. Calgary basically scored 17 points in the last 4 minutes of the game. It was 23-31. And a Trevor Harris fumble return for a touchdown. That pretty much blew both the cover and any chance for late fantasy points by Trevor Harris as they put the backup in at that point. Ernest Jackson continues to be the main man for Trevor Harris. So we'll see if there's any change in that going forward. And boy, ho-hum, another 360-yard, 2-touchdown performance for Bolave Mitchell. That was actually one of the top performances for quarterback this week, but in other weeks that's not really that great of a score. But he's consistent. Boy, is he consistent. I just don't know if it's worth paying up for that. Messam was pretty quiet. Marquay McDaniel had a big game, 110 yards. Of course, this ended up as a cover for Calgary and an easy over, but I lost that game wagering on the Red Blacks. And then the last game of the week was Eskimos at Rough Riders, and the Rough Riders won in overtime 26-23. Saskatchewan continues to be a cover machine. I think they've covered five in a row against the spread as they went outright at home. Durant had a pretty poor game. He had like 174 passing. But the return of Curtis Steele helped the run game tremendously. He had almost 100 yards. Armani Edwards was the top receiving option for Saskatchewan. Remember, Roosevelt's out. Darius Bowman was otherworldly again with 9 catches for 152 yards. Riley went over 300 yards, but the game went under. I almost bet the under in this game. I was expecting, after 2 high-scoring games, something to be a little more reasonable. And the line didn't really move, and I was also thinking about Saskatchewan money line, but it wasn't high enough for me to take that risk. But I'm glad I got the win on the Saskatchewan plus 5.5. So that's it for week 13. It was a pretty average week for me overall, and going into week 14, I'm going to do something new and something a little fun. And for me, is I'm going to play GPPs on DraftKings. DraftKings actually sent me some free entries last week, or one free entry, and I cashed it on NFL, and I'm going to take that money and put it into CFL GPPs. So I'm entering 7 different lineups into 3 contests. The contests are really low entry fees. It's not a substantial amount of money. I'm spending about $35, but we'll see what happens. We'll see if I can be competitive. So tune in next week for the results. Now, you got to understand that not doing a cash lineup, instead of trying to get that high floor, I'm going to be shooting for low-owned players, so I'm going to be taking risks. So some of my lineups will probably miss horribly, and a couple hopefully will connect for a nice payday. So we'll see what happens. So stay tuned for that. So let's move right along and get into week 14, which is 2 games on Friday, 2 games on Saturday. I kind of like that schedule, although I do like having some games on Sunday. NFL has just been really boring to watch this year. A lot of low-scoring games. CFL just seems to be a better product for television, in my opinion. I know other people don't agree, but I really enjoy it. So let's get on to week 14. First game is Toronto at Ottawa. Ottawa minus 5.5 favorite. 53.5 is the total here. I've said before that Lefevre is an average CFL quarterback at best. I expect him to have a real stinker before the year is out, and this is a good letdown spot for him. Now, he seems to have struck a rapport with the receiving core in Toronto. They've been throwing a lot of touchdown passes, but there's a reason why he didn't have a job at the beginning of the season, because he hasn't been consistent. And maybe he's improved, but I'm more likely to bet against him than on him going forward. Ottawa has struggled offensively lately, and I would consider maybe even going back to Henry Burris here. Trevor Harris, he had a bad game, but there's a good way for him to get off the snide, and that's against his old team in Toronto. I'm sure he'll be motivated. All the usual studs are in play here. I'm leaning towards Ernest Jackson, Brandon Whitaker, Deontay Spencer. I like, and then Madhu for Ottawa is going to get the start at running back. He should be very moderately priced, so a good value play there. I like a desperate Ottawa team here to cover at home. Not really an opinion on the total. It could go either way. But Ottawa really needs a win, and they're hungry for a win. And Trevor, I think, would like to stick it to Toronto. So that's what I'm planning on happening tonight. The second Friday game is BC at Edmonton. Edmonton is currently a 1-point favorite, and 55 is the total. This is a big game for Edmonton at 5-7 as they fight for that transfer playoff spot. For those of you not familiar with the playoffs, the top two teams are guaranteed in each division are guaranteed a playoff spot, and then the next two best records. So there's three teams in each division technically that make the playoffs. But since there's more teams in the West than the East, then a fourth team from the West could make the playoffs and transfer over. It sounds more complicated than it really is. Just basically the top six teams make the playoffs. BC has been boom or bust at quarterback all year, and that's what's going to decide this game. If they have a good game at quarterback, they're going to win. If they have a crappy game at quarterback, they're going to lose. Both Jeremiah Johnson and Shakir Bell should be good options at running back this week. I don't think you can fade Darius Bowman, regardless of his price, in a big spot like this. This is a must game for them. You would expect Riley to put up good yardage, win or lose, and Bowman and Walker to put up good yardage. I do like the under here at 55.5 or higher. I think BC has a good defense, and I think they may struggle a little bit on offense or concentrate more on the run game. So that leans me towards the under there. And I lean Edmonton at a pick'em. I don't really like taking -1, but I don't have a real strong feeling on this game. But I feel like this is a really big game for Edmonton. If there was a statement game, this is it, after a horrible week last week. So on to the Saturday games. We have Winnipeg at Calgary, and Calgary -9.5 point favorite. 53 is the total. It's hard to fade Calgary at home, but they are due for another loss this season. I doubt they'll go 17-1. 15-3 is more likely, but Nichols has been great for Winnipeg. They've won 7 in a row, but he doesn't really score that well, even on the good days. So I don't like him in this matchup to score fantasy points. McDuffie is more involved in the offense, but recent depth chart says he might not play this week. So, and also whoever starts at running back for Winnipeg will be a great value. Other than that, all the usual studs are in play here. I like Winnipeg to cover if this gets to 11. Plus 11, I like Winnipeg here. Both are good defenses, so I like the under if it gets to 53.5. I would take the under here. And then let's move on to the last game of the week, and that's Hamilton at Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan's a 5-point dog at home, and 52 is the total. Ticats really struggled last week, and I expect a breakout here. I expect them to get out of their funk. I would see if Tolliver is playing or not. That'll affect touches on the other receivers. Durant might be a good fantasy play this week. If Saskatchewan gets behind big, he's going to have to throw, and if he throws, he'll probably do some scrambling. So he may end up being a good value play. Edwards and Holly will be the top receivers for Saskatchewan. Of course, Curtis Steele is a good running back option for them. And I like a Hamilton cover here, plus the over. I think if Hamilton breaks out of their scoring funk, this is an easy over at 52. So that's my preview of Week 14. That's it for this week. If you have any questions or comments, please hit me up on my Twitter at Buffalo Hold'em. I always post my plays and usually my DFS cash lineups on there, and I post my betting results at the end of every month. Appreciate you checking us out. Come back next week for another episode. So thank you very much for listening. Take care. Bye.